Hey there. Welcome to Midnight Sleep Crime. I'm here to help you relax tonight. I know many of you use this video to fall asleep. So, before you get cozy, also, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'd love to hear from you. Story 1. It was 3:42 a.m. when the first scream shattered the quiet of Riverside's downtown streets. Not the kind of scream you hear in a movie. Not the kind you dismiss as a nightmare or drunken fight. This was raw, jagged, human. Detective Daniel Reyes had been awake less than an hour, nursing black coffee in his cramped apartment 2 blocks away, when his phone rang. The night dispatcher's voice was tense. "Reyes, you're going to want to see this." The scene. The apartment above Maggie's bakery was small, cluttered with the faint smell of yeast and something metallic beneath it. Neighbors had called, reporting screams, strange noises, and, oddly, a series of lights flickering from the second-floor window despite the building's power outage. When Daniel arrived, the street was eerily quiet. A lone patrol car's lights washed over the cracked pavement. The only movement came from a thin figure slumped against the bakery's front door. It was the landlord. The landlord's story. He was shaking, clutching a clipboard like a lifeline. "Upstairs. I didn't," he stammered. "I didn't go in. I just heard screaming. She wasn't answering. Not the door, nothing." Daniel frowned. "Who lives there?" Margot. Margot Green," the landlord said. "Apartment 2B. She's quiet. Keeps to herself mostly." The entry. Daniel pulled the keys from his jacket pocket. The landlord had left an emergency copy. The metal key turned slowly in the lock. Inside, the apartment was a contradiction. Neat, almost sterile in its orderliness, with the faint smell of cinnamon lingering from the bakery below. Then Daniel saw it. The body. Margot Green was on the floor in the center of the living room. Not slumped, not curled, but lying flat, face up, eyes wide open. The expression frozen in fear. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a struggle. And yet, Daniel's stomach twisted. Something was off. The marks. Small scratches, almost imperceptible, ran across her forearms and neck. Thin, precise, like someone, or something, had drawn a pattern. And the most disturbing thing, on the wall next to her, in faint smudges of blood, was a single word. "Watching." First responders. The EMTs arrived. They confirmed what Daniel already suspected. Margot was dead. But the scratches, the word, they didn't make sense. No defensive wounds. No obvious cause of death. No weapon. Just fear etched into skin and wall. The first clue. Daniel crouched beside the body. A faint, sticky substance coated her fingertips. Almost like glue. Almost like something had tried to leave a mark on her. He bagged it carefully, because whatever had left it, it wasn't ordinary. Neighbors' statements. They came in waves. The baker, a night shift janitor, a taxi driver. Everyone reported seeing shadows move upstairs. Everyone swore the lights flickered when no one was inside. Everyone mentioned hearing breathing. The pattern emerges. Daniel thought about previous cases. Missing persons. Sudden deaths. People found at home, alone, with strange marks. Nothing stolen, nothing broken. And then he realized he was staring at the beginning of something far bigger. The Night Watcher. The term Night Watcher came unbidden to his mind. Not a nickname. Not a rumor. Something older. Persistent. Something that had been here before Margot Green. And would be here again. The first warning. As Daniel stepped back to secure the crime scene, his phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. No name. Just a location. She's not the first. And she won't be the last. Daniel's blood ran cold. The ending hook. Because in that moment, Daniel understood something terrifying. This wasn't a random murder. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was the work of someone, or something, that chose its victims carefully, silently, and always left a message. A predator who wasn't satisfied with killing. A predator who watched. And the first chapter of this nightmare had just begun. Detective Daniel Reyes couldn't shake the feeling that Margot Green's apartment was a living thing. It wasn't just the neatness, the faint smell of cinnamon, or the eerily calm air. It was something beneath it all, something deliberate. Something that had been waiting, returning to the scene. Daniel arrived before sunrise, long after the crime scene tape had gone up. The coroner's van was gone, the EMTs gone, the landlord gone, leaving him alone with the apartment. He pulled on a pair of latex gloves and unlocked the door. The key still hung in the lock, cold and metallic, like a silent invitation. Inside, the apartment was deceptively ordinary. Margot Green's belongings were in place, books lined the shelves, a stack of unpaid bills sat neatly on the counter, and a pair of slippers rested near the doorway. Yet Daniel's gut told him there was more than met the eye. The first discovery. He approached Margot's desk. A small laptop sat open, its screen dark. On the desk, a notebook lay closed, as if waiting for someone to read it. He flipped it open carefully. The pages were filled with neat handwriting, but the content was strange, lists of names, dates, and times. Almost like a diary, but not personal. Observational. Cold. Sample entry. March 12th, 9:03 p.m. The shadows linger near the building. They watch the windows. They pause when someone enters or leaves. Daniel frowned. That was the night before she died. Another entry. March 13th, 11:17 p.m. The breathing grows louder. The air feels heavier. I can't see anyone, but I know they are here. He shivered. This wasn't a diary. This was documentation. Margot Green had been keeping track of something, or someone, that had been haunting her for weeks. The hidden drawer. Daniel's eyes caught the edge of a drawer beneath the desk. Something had been taped shut. Carefully, he pried it open. Inside was a stack of envelopes, all unmarked, except for the last one. If anything happens to me. He opened it. Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten note. Everything you need to know is here. Trust no one. They watch. They wait. They strike when you think it's safe. Look at the footage. It will show you everything. Daniel's hand shook slightly as he pocketed the drive. The apartment's layout. He moved methodically through the apartment, noting every detail. The living room window overlooked the bakery below. Perfect vantage point. The bedroom window faced an alley. Dark, narrow, easy to hide in. The bathroom mirror had a faint smear, almost like someone had pressed their palm against it and then wiped it away. Nothing seemed forced. Nothing broken. And yet, the apartment felt alive. Like it knew he was there. Reviewing the USB. Back at his car, Daniel plugged in the drive. The screen flickered to life, showing multiple video files, some from her phone, some from the security camera she had secretly installed in her apartment. The first video was timestamped March 10th, 3 nights before her death. The footage. Margot Green entered her apartment at 10:12 p.m. She closed the door carefully, checked the locks, and began walking toward her desk. Then the shadows moved. Not outside. Inside. The corner of the living room darkened unnaturally, like a shape that shouldn't have been there. Margot froze. The air seemed to ripple. And then, something appeared. A figure. Impossible to make out. Not human, not animal. Just wrong. It didn't move. Not exactly. But the camera captured it shifting, stretching in ways no physical body could. Margot's eyes widened. She whispered something. I know you're here. And the figure tilted its head. The pattern. Daniel scrolled through the videos. It wasn't just one night. March 10th, the shadow appears. March 11th, object slightly moved. March 12th, the breathing. Faint, irregular, like someone, or something, was pacing. March 13th, the final confrontation. Margot screaming, the shadow closing in. The unseen presence. It was clear to Daniel now. This wasn't a person stalking Margot. This wasn't a burglar. This wasn't even human. This was something intelligent. Something patient. Something that could observe without being seen. And most importantly, something that had targeted her. The first lead. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. You shouldn't be looking. He ignored it at first. Then another came. They are in every apartment. You will be next if you continue. The connection. Daniel's mind raced. The apartment above the bakery wasn't just a crime scene. It was a hub. Margot Green had tried to document it. She had fought it in her own way. And the shadow, whatever it was, had won. The hidden secret. The final video on the drive was the most disturbing. Margot Green had set up a camera in the corner of her bedroom. In the footage, She was talking to something invisible, whispering apologies, whispering warnings, and then she raised a small, black device, a remote of some kind. The shadow recoiled. It paused, tilted, then vanished. Margot collapsed, breathing heavily. The screen flickered to black. The realization. Daniel leaned back in his car seat, mind spinning. The apartment wasn't just where she lived. It was where she had tried to fight back. It was where she had known too much. And now, that knowledge had likely marked him too. The final clue. One corner of the room, overlooked by most cameras, showed a small vent. Tiny scratches on the metal. Almost imperceptible. Something, or someone, had been moving through the apartment without ever appearing on camera. And Daniel knew, with a sinking certainty, that the apartment wasn't done hiding its secrets. The ending hook. Because the shadows were patient. The watcher had waited for months, maybe years. And now that Daniel had looked, now that he had seen, he had joined the list. The ones who knew. The ones who might not survive. Detective Daniel Reyes hadn't slept since he discovered Margot Green's apartment. His car smelled faintly of burnt coffee, and the early morning sunlight cutting across Riverside streets did nothing to lighten the weight in his chest. The night watcher, as he had begun calling it, hadn't just been a theory. It had been real. And it had been patient. The call from dispatch. It came just before noon. Detective Reyes, the dispatcher's voice trembled. We have a report, apartment 3C. Janet Moore. She's gone. Daniel's stomach sank. Gone how? He asked, already knowing the answer. The dispatcher hesitated. Neighbors say she disappeared. No signs of forced entry. No struggle. Windows closed. Nothing. Daniel grabbed his coat and keys, muttering, just like Margot. Arrival at 3C. The building felt different today. Quieter. Daniel stepped into the narrow hallway, the walls yellowed with age, lights flickering intermittently. Apartment 3C was directly above the bakery, 2 doors down from where Margot Green had lived. The landlord met him at the door, wringing his hands. She's just gone, he stammered. Daniel nodded. I need to see the apartment. The apartment. Janet Moore's apartment was tidy, too tidy. Nothing had been disturbed. No signs of a struggle. Her belongings were in place, dishes in the sink, a half-read book on the couch, her laptop closed on the desk. But Daniel noticed the small details immediately. A chair slightly tilted toward the bedroom. A thin layer of dust on the floor, except for one trail, as if someone, or something, had hovered above it. A faint smell, metallic and sweet, like copper and sugar combined. And then there was the sound, a low, almost imperceptible hum, vibrating through the walls. The empty room. Daniel moved cautiously through the apartment. No signs of Janet Moore. No windows broken. No doors forced. No footprints outside. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. The pattern. Daniel's mind raced back to Margot Green. Scratches on the skin. The word watching. The shadows captured on the video. The vent scratches in her apartment. It was all the same. And now it was happening again. The night watcher wasn't confined to one apartment. It moved. It hunted. And it learned. The neighbor's testimony. Mrs. Duval, an elderly woman across the hall, was the first to be interviewed. I heard whispering, she said, trembling. Around midnight. Soft, like someone speaking just outside my window. Then nothing. Just silence. I didn't see her leave. I don't know what I saw. Daniel nodded slowly. Did you see anyone else in the hallway? Mrs. Duval shook her head. No. I didn't even hear footsteps. It's like she vanished. The CCTV footage. The building had security cameras covering the hallways. Daniel reviewed the footage with growing unease. Janet Moore left her apartment at 11:47 p.m. according to the timestamp. She locked the door behind her. Then, nothing. Not a shadow. Not a sound. Not a single movement on the hallway cameras. The last frame. Her hand on the doorknob, frozen. Then black. The key clue. Daniel noticed something on the floor beneath the doorknob. Faint scratches, circular, almost like someone, or something, had tried to manipulate the lock from the inside without touching it. He took a photo. Exactly like Margot's vent scratches, he muttered. Call who had arrived to assist, frowned. It's evolving. Daniel didn't respond. He already knew. The building responds. As Daniel and Cole reviewed the apartment, the hallway lights flickered violently. Then the air shifted. A whisper, soft, almost melodic, echoed through the walls. Daniel froze. Did you hear that? Cole nodded, swallowing hard. Yes, it's calling again. The investigative thread. Daniel pieced together the timeline. Margot Green disappears in 2B. Janet Moore disappears in 3C. Both apartments above the bakery. Both quiet, reserved women. Both vanished without signs of struggle. Pattern confirmed. The night watcher was targeting the building, starting from the lower floors and moving up. The first theory. Cole suggested a rational explanation. Maybe it's someone with access, a neighbor, a landlord, someone hiding in the vents. Daniel shook his head. No. The footage. The scratches. The metallic smell. It's something else. Something not human. Cole's expression hardened. You mean, like Margot Green's videos? Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at the faint scratches beneath the door, already noting their eerie similarity to the previous apartment. The second warning. Daniel's phone buzzed. Another text. Unknown number. You are next. Stop watching or join her. He threw the phone onto the counter, heart racing. You see, he said to Cole. It's aware we're looking. Cole swallowed hard. So what do we do? Daniel's jaw tightened. We keep watching. Because if we don't, we're blind to it. The first contact. Late that night, Daniel returned to the building. Alone. He needed to see the apartment himself. Needed to understand the pattern. As he approached 3C, he noticed the door, slightly ajar. Impossible. The building had locks. No one had keys except residents and the landlord. And the landlord had already confirmed he hadn't touched it. Inside the apartment, Daniel stepped carefully inside. The air was colder than the hallway. The faint hum persisted. He scanned the room, nothing out of place. But then he noticed the shadow in the corner of the living room. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was a presence. Watching him. The first sign of movement. The shadow shifted slightly when he moved. Not like a human. Not like an animal. But it reacted. Calculated. Observant. Daniel froze. Then he realized Janet Moore hadn't just vanished. She had been taken. By it. And now, the night watcher was aware of him. The final hook. As he reached for his flashlight, a whisper filled the apartment. Thank you for noticing. It wasn't malicious. Not yet. But it was deliberate. Daniel understood immediately. He had just joined the list of people it watched. And the night watcher had only just begun. Detective Daniel Reyes sat in his car outside the building, staring at the flickering hallway lights. The street was quiet, almost unnervingly so. After Margot Green and Janet Moore vanished, he knew there was no room for mistakes. He had decided on surveillance, cameras, motion sensors, audio recorders, every tool available. But he didn't yet realize that the night watcher didn't just move unseen. It manipulated reality itself, or at least the way humans perceived it. The setup. Daniel had spent the morning installing small cameras in the hallway, discreetly mounted near the ceiling corners. He had audio recorders hidden behind vent covers and a motion sensor in the stairwell. Cole watched from the stairwell. You really think this will work? He asked. Daniel tightened his jaw. It has to. We need to see it to stop it. To understand it. Cole's unease was clear. Or we'll just make it aware we're watching. Daniel didn't answer. He focused on the monitors in his car. Each feed displayed a quiet, empty hallway. The first hour. Nothing happened. At first, Daniel felt relief. The hallway was empty. Silent. Ordinary. Then he noticed something. One camera feed flickered. Static for a second, then returned to normal. He frowned. Cole, did you see that? Cole leaned over. What? The feed. It blinked. Probably a loose connection, Cole said, shrugging. But Daniel didn't believe him. The whispering. At 1:13 a.m., a faint whisper drifted over the audio feed. Daniel leaned closer. He barely made out the words. Don't look. He spun the car door open, stepping out into the hallway. Empty. No one. The whisper repeated, slightly louder, almost urgent. Don't look. The camera fails. He returned to the car. One camera feed had gone completely black. He checked the recorder. Dead. Another feed flickered. The shadows along the hallway walls elongated, stretching unnaturally. Daniel's chest tightened. Cole, it knows. Cole swallowed hard. Knows what? That we're watching. The first visual contact. From the corner of his eye, Daniel noticed movement in the top left feed. A shadow in the hallway. But when he turned to the monitor, it was gone. The shadow reappeared in the opposite corner. Faster this time. Closer. Not human. Not animal. Manipulating perception. Daniel realized something terrifying. The Night Watcher wasn't hiding. It was bending the surveillance tools. Cameras, audio, even the motion sensors. They didn't fail by accident. It was deliberate. It wanted him to think he was safe. It wanted him to underestimate its presence. The alarm. At 1:52 a.m., the motion sensor tripped. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and sprinted to the stairwell. Nothing. Then he heard it, a faint metallic scraping from above, apartment 2B. He froze. That apartment had been empty since Margot Green vanished. The stairwell. Daniel cautiously climbed the stairs. The smell hit him first, metallic, coppery, like iron blood mixed with dust. He reached the top floor. Empty. No sign of life. But the air felt heavy. Watching. The lights flicker. Suddenly, the overhead lights flickered violently. The hall seemed longer, darker than it should have been. Daniel's flashlight caught movement in the shadows. A figure darted across the wall. Too fast. Too smooth. He ran toward it. Empty hallway. The camera on him. Back in his car, Daniel checked the monitor. One camera feed showed him climbing the stairs, but something was wrong. The feed displayed two versions of him, both climbing, one moving slightly behind the other, almost like a shadow clone. Daniel's heart raced. "It's learning me," he whispered. Cole's voice trembled through the radio. "What do you mean?" "It's replicating me. It knows how I move, how I respond, how I think." The first trap. Suddenly, the hallway cameras all went black. Daniel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A single text. "Stop watching, or join them." A cold wave of panic hit him. "Cole, it's coming," he said. From the shadows, movement. Slow. Calculated. Watching him. The first attack. Daniel saw it for the first time directly. A humanoid shape, tall, thin, featureless, gliding just above the ground. It didn't run. Didn't move its legs. But it approached, silent, precise. Daniel fumbled for his flashlight. The beam hit it, but the shape distorted. The light bent around it. Cole's voice came frantic over the radio. "Daniel, get out!" Daniel turned to run, but the stairwell door slammed shut behind him. The escape attempt. He banged on the door. Nothing. The shape moved closer. Closer. Its featureless face tilted. A low whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Daniel's chest tightened. The hallway seemed to stretch infinitely. The shadows twisted unnaturally around him. The realization. He understood in that moment. The Night Watcher wasn't limited to apartments. Not even to the building. It could manipulate space, perception, and technology. It could anticipate human behavior. And it was always one step ahead. The final warning. As Daniel braced for the inevitable, his phone buzzed again. Another text. Unknown number. Watching isn't safe, but hiding is worse. The shadow paused, as if reading the message. Then it vanished into the darkness. The aftermath. Daniel and Cole regrouped outside the building, shaken but alive. "It's evolving," Cole said quietly. Daniel nodded. "And it knows us now. Every move we make, every thought we have, it can predict. We can't fight it with normal methods anymore." Cole swallowed hard. "Then what do we do?" Daniel didn't answer. He knew there was no simple solution. Only one certainty. The Night Watcher wasn't just in the apartments. It was everywhere it wanted to be. And the building, the neighborhood, the city, they were just its playground. The ending hook. That night, as Daniel drove home, he passed an apartment 2 blocks away. A window flickered. A shadow lingered in the corner. Watching. And this time, it was aware that he saw it. Detective Daniel Reyes hadn't slept properly since the Night Watcher revealed itself. Each flicker of a light, Each unusual shadow in his apartment made him flinch. He knew the entity wasn't just limited to Margot Green's building. It was patient, adaptive, and now it was learning him. Yet nothing prepared him for what came next. The 5:23 a.m. call. The dispatcher's voice was clipped, urgent. Detective Reyes, 4D resident missing. Neighbors are reporting strange noises and lights. Daniel groaned, running a hand over his face. Apartment 4D, directly above Janet Moore's vanished apartment. The building was being systematically picked apart, one tenant at a time. "I'm on my way," he said, grabbing his coat and keys. Cole met him at the building. His face was pale, eyes darting nervously toward every window. "Another one?" he asked. Daniel nodded grimly. "We need to find out how it's doing this, or where next." The apartment of Rachel Kim. Apartment 4D belonged to Rachel Kim, a young woman in her mid-20s, known for keeping to herself. Her friends described her as quiet, almost invisible, a stark contrast to the chaos that now surrounded the building. Daniel and Cole approached cautiously. The hallway was silent. Too silent. The door to 4D was closed, but unlocked. Daniel's stomach twisted. He gently turned the knob. The empty apartment. The apartment was eerily normal. Rachel's belongings were in place, a backpack on the floor, a laptop on her desk, a half-empty cup of coffee on the kitchen counter. Nothing appeared disturbed. No signs of struggle. No footprints leading outside. Yet, she was gone. The notes. Daniel noticed something on the coffee table, a notebook, open. The handwriting was different from Margot Green's or Janet Moore's, but the content was similar. Notes about shadows, whispers, and strange lights in the hallway. One entry caught Daniel's attention. March 15th, 11:45 p.m. Something watches me tonight. I hear it moving above the ceiling. I feel it in the walls. I don't know how to stop it. It was chillingly precise. Rachel had known it was coming. She had been documenting it. The clue in the ceiling. Daniel inspected the ceiling. Tiny scratches lined the vent cover. Marks similar to those found in Margot Green's apartment and Janet Moore's. "It moves through vents," Daniel whispered. "It doesn't need doors." Cole shivered. "It's learning faster than we can keep up." Daniel nodded. He realized the pattern. The night watcher didn't just observe. It adapted, strategized, and chose its victims carefully. The missing neighbor. The next day, Daniel knocked on the neighboring apartment doors, trying to interview anyone who might have seen Rachel. One neighbor, a man named Greg Walters, claimed he heard faint whispers from the vents around 11:30 p.m. "I thought it was my imagination," Greg said. I swear I saw shadows moving along the walls. Not human shadows. Wrong shapes." Daniel's gut tightened. The night watcher wasn't just targeting isolated tenants. It was moving through the building systematically. And the vent scratches weren't random. They were entry points. The security footage. Daniel retrieved the building's CCTV footage. What he saw made his blood run cold. Rachel Kim leaving her apartment at 11:47 p.m. according to the timestamp. Locking the door. Then, nothing. The hallway cameras didn't capture her leaving. No one entered the building. No one left. Yet she was gone. Daniel replayed the footage repeatedly. The hallway seemed normal, until he noticed the faintest distortion, a blur in the corner, almost like heat haze. He froze. That blur wasn't an artifact of the camera. It was her being taken. The metallic smell. Daniel entered the apartment to inspect further. The metallic, coppery smell, the same one from Janet Moore's apartment, was stronger here. He bent to sniff the vent. The scratches were deeper than before. It was growing bolder, learning faster. The first contact. That night, Daniel returned to the building, determined to stake it out himself. He parked in his car, watching the windows. Then, at precisely 2:03 a.m., he saw movement in 4D. A shadow flickered across the room. It wasn't human. It hovered, stretching unnaturally. Daniel grabbed his flashlight. The figure reacted, shifting, disappearing, then reappearing near the ceiling. A whisper, "You shouldn't be here." Daniel's hands shook. Cole's voice came through the radio. "Daniel, you need to get out." The disturbing message. Daniel glanced at his phone, another text, unknown number. "She is now with us. Do not interfere." He realized with horror, Rachel Kim wasn't missing. She had been claimed. The night watcher didn't just remove victims, it absorbed them. The observation. Daniel looked at the building, dark and silent in the early morning. He counted the apartments above the bakery, 2B, 3C, 4D. Margot Green, Janet Moore, Rachel Kim. 3 victims, 3 patterns. And he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The night watcher was choosing the next target. The desperate theory. Cole whispered, almost inaudibly. It's inside the building, but not really. Maybe it's everywhere it wants to be. Daniel nodded. And the apartments? Just bait. The night watcher wasn't just hunting, it was testing, learning, evolving. The final hook. Daniel left the building that night, exhausted and shaken. From across the street, he noticed a figure in the top floor window, standing still, watching him, and then it vanished. Daniel realized with grim clarity. The night watcher wasn't done, and this time, it knew exactly who was next. Detective Daniel Reyes had learned a terrifying truth. The night watcher wasn't just a predator, it was adaptive, patient, intelligent, and above all, it chose its victims carefully. After Rachel Kim's disappearance, Daniel knew the next tenant might either vanish or fight back. The new tenant. Apartment 5E had recently been rented to Lila Moreno, a woman in her early 30s. Unlike the previous tenants, Lila had a reputation, fearless, resourceful, and unusually perceptive. Daniel had done his homework. He knew Lila was aware of the building's history. A few tenants had told him she read extensively about the disappearances and strange occurrences in the block above Maga's bakery. She was unlike Margot Green, Janet Moore, or Rachel Kim. And that made her dangerous to the night watcher. The first signs. The night Daniel and Cole surveilled 5E, Lila was awake past midnight, lights on, moving around deliberately. She had cameras set up, not hidden, positioned openly in the corners of her apartment. Daniel whispered to Cole, "She's trying to lure it. I'll study it." Cole shook his head. "That's reckless. The night watcher doesn't play fair." Daniel said nothing. He already knew. Lila wasn't ordinary. The disturbing activity. At 12:47 a.m., the first flicker appeared. The shadow moved along the ceiling. Distorted, featureless, but deliberate. Lila didn't scream. She didn't hide. She spoke softly, almost as if negotiating. "I see you. I know you're here. But you won't take me." Daniel's jaw tightened. This was different. No previous tenant had confronted it. The shadow reacts. The night watcher paused. The room temperature dropped. The lights flickered violently, shadows stretching to impossible lengths. Lila continued speaking calmly, pacing slowly. She picked up a metal rod and began tapping near the vent where previous tenants had vanished. "You don't own this building. You don't own me. I see your scratches. I see your patterns. You won't control me." The shadow shifted, twisting unnaturally, almost as if confused. Daniel and Cole watched through the surveillance feeds from their car. Cole whispered, "It's hesitating. That's new." Daniel nodded. "It's never hesitated before." The first defense. Lila had set small traps, cameras hooked to motion sensors, reflective surfaces angled toward vents, and a thick line of talc powder along the floor to detect movement. When the night watcher moved, the talc reacted, not by leaving footprints, but by distorting in impossible patterns. The shadow seemed frustrated, recoiling slightly when approaching the vent. Daniel realized Lila was not just observing. She was forcing the night watcher to reveal itself. The confrontation. At 1:13 a.m., the shadow fully emerged from the vent. Taller than any human, featureless, its form bending and stretching unnaturally. But Lila didn't run. She approached it slowly, rod in hand. "You've been hiding. You've been patient. But you're not invisible." The shadow paused. Then it tilted its featureless head. A whisper filled the apartment. "You notice?" Lila smiled slightly. "Yes. And noticing is the first step to control." The first evidence. Daniel watched in disbelief. Lila began recording with multiple cameras. She traced its movements, drew its shadow on paper, and marked areas of distortion on the monitors. Cole muttered, "She's documenting it? That's insane." Daniel nodded. "No, that's brilliant. This might be the first time anyone has actually studied it, while staying alive." The The shadow retreats. For the first time, the night watcher recoiled. It didn't disappear entirely but retreated into the vents, leaving distortions behind. Lila didn't follow. She stayed calm, breathing evenly, eyes locked on the vent. Daniel whispered to Cole, "It's afraid." Or at least, cautious. That's the first reaction we've ever seen from it. The analysis. Back in their car, Daniel reviewed the footage with Cole. Lila's preparation had forced the night watcher into a defensive posture. It could anticipate movement, but it hadn't expected active confrontation. Its adaptive nature meant it could learn from this encounter. Daniel's stomach sank. It's learning faster than any of us realized. This fight isn't over. Cole shivered. Do you think Lila knows that? Daniel shook his head. She's brave, but I don't think anyone can truly know it, yet. The warning. At 3:02 a.m., Lila received a text from an unknown number. You should not have challenged us. She didn't react visibly. She glanced at the camera, then whispered, "I'm still here, and I'm not afraid." Daniel realized something crucial. The night watcher didn't just strike silently. It tested, it intimidated, it observed. Lila had survived the first encounter, but the entity would come back stronger, smarter. The first breakthrough. Daniel reviewed the shadow distortions frame by frame. It seemed to react to sound, light, and movement simultaneously. It avoided direct contact when confronted with deliberate, prepared resistance. It left traces, vent scratches, shadows, distortions, that could be studied. For the first time, Daniel saw a chance, not to capture it, but to understand it. The ending hook. As Daniel left the building at dawn, he glanced at 5E. The window was dark, but he felt the gaze of something beyond. Watching. Waiting. He realized a horrifying truth. Lila had survived tonight, but the night watcher would return. And next time, it wouldn't hesitate. The night had grown heavy over the building above Maga's bakery. Detective Daniel Reyes and Lila Moreno had spent hours setting up surveillance in and around apartment 5E, hoping to catch the night watcher, or at least understand it. But patience had its own dangers. The new target. Apartment 6F had recently been rented to Martin Caldwell, an introverted man in his 40s who rarely left his apartment. He was careful, methodical, and solitary, a prime candidate for the night watcher's next victim. Daniel had warned him, "You need to stay alert. Lights on, doors locked, but more importantly, trust your instincts." Martin had nodded nervously, clutching his phone like a lifeline. The surveillance begins. From their car across the street, Daniel and Lila monitored 6F with night vision cameras and audio devices. At 11:02 p.m., Martin closed his door, checked the locks, and settled at his desk. Daniel whispered, "We need to record everything. Every shadow, every sound." Lila nodded, adjusting the cameras. "We'll know if it comes. This time, we'll have evidence." The first signs. At 11:37 p.m., the hallway lights flickered briefly. Daniel leaned forward. "There. Did you see that?" The shadow moved. Not fully visible, but the distortion in the feed made it undeniable. Lila whispered, "It's aware of us watching." Daniel's stomach tightened. And it's coming for him now. The audio disturbances. A soft whispering filled the audio feed. Not words, just fragmented syllables, like echoes from a broken radio. Martin sat upright, tense. He muttered under his breath, "Not again, please, not again." The air in 6F grew heavier. The faint metallic smell Daniel had learned to associate with disappearances drifted through the speakers. Cole, watching from another vantage point, whispered, "It's feeding off fear." Daniel nodded. "And it's patient. It waits until the fear is high enough to act." The disappearance. At 11:49 p.m., the feed from 6F glitched violently. Martin Caldwell was gone. The camera shook slightly, then returned to normal, empty apartment, desk chair upright, cup of coffee untouched. No doors open. No windows broken. Lila pressed the monitor closer. "He is gone." Daniel's heart sank. Exactly like the others. It doesn't just take, they vanish. No trace. The first evidence of interaction. Daniel noticed a subtle disturbance. Dust particles shifted along the floor in a circular pattern. The air shimmered slightly near the vent above the bedroom. Shadows in the corners twisted unnaturally, stretching beyond the camera's perception. It was deliberate. The night watcher left markers, but not enough for ordinary humans to detect. The attempted capture. Daniel suggested sending Lila inside with a small camera on her vest. No, she said firmly. We need to observe. Not confront. Not yet. It learns too quickly. If we go in unprepared, we're the next victim. Daniel agreed, though the sight of the empty 6F apartment haunted him. The clues in the shadow. Reviewing the night's footage, Daniel noticed something new. The night watcher appeared to avoid the camera's direct line of sight, bending around them. It manipulated shadows, elongating and compressing them to distort perception. Vent scratches were deeper, suggesting it could climb walls and ceilings with unnatural precision. This isn't just stalking, Daniel said grimly. It's studying its prey. The warning message. Lila's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You are watching. You will all join them soon. Her face remained calm. It's trying to intimidate us, she whispered. Daniel didn't respond. He knew better. The night watcher wasn't bluffing. The psychological effect. Daniel and Lila noticed another disturbing trend. Neighbors who remained in their apartments grew increasingly paranoid. Shadows seemed to appear in peripheral vision, even when cameras showed nothing. The building felt alive, corridors bending, lights flickering at will, a persistent low hum in the walls. It was becoming not just a predator but a manipulator of perception. The first clue to its origin. Examining footage from previous disappearances, Daniel noticed a subtle pattern. The night watcher seemed linked to the building's vents and structural crevices. The disturbances all originated from older sections of the building, where metal and wood met at irregular angles. It left patterns, almost like a code, in the dust and scratches. Daniel realized with horror, this was more than a stalking entity. It had a purpose, a design. The next move. By 2 a.m., Daniel and Lila had pieced together a plan. Observe without entering. Track every shadow, every flicker. Note vent disturbances, whispers, and distortions. Avoid confrontation until patterns were fully understood. Cole voiced what they were all thinking. It's only a matter of time before it strikes again. Daniel nodded. And next time, we'll be ready. The ending hook. From across the street, Daniel noticed a shadow in the stairwell of 6F. It wasn't moving like a human. It tilted its featureless head, as if acknowledging them. Then, it vanished. Daniel shivered. He understood now. The night watcher wasn't just in the building. It was watching them outside it, anticipating their every move. And Daniel knew with chilling certainty. The next disappearance was imminent. Detective Daniel Reyes sat in the car across the street from the building, eyes glued to the monitors. Lila Moreno had spent the last 48 hours preparing for this night, transforming her apartment into a trap. Every previous encounter with the night watcher had been reactive, watching, recording, surviving. But tonight, they were going to take the first offensive step. The preparation. Apartment 5E was unlike any other unit in the building now. Lila had cameras mounted in every corner, feeding directly to Daniel's laptop in the car. Motion sensors along the floor and near vents. Mirrors angled toward ceiling crevices and hallways. Reflective strips of foil to disorient shadows. White chalk and talc powder tracing every doorway and vent, revealing even the faintest movements. This will show us everything it does, Lila said, adjusting the last sensor. And maybe, just maybe, it'll give us leverage. Daniel nodded, gripping his coffee tightly. Leverage or bait. Either way, we need to see it, not just survive it. Cole muttered nervously. I still think it's smarter than us. This could backfire. Daniel didn't answer. He already knew. The first disturbance. At precisely 11:11 p.m., the building seemed to breathe. Lights flickered. A cold draft ran along the hallway. The monitors began displaying minor distortions. Lila remained calm. She whispered, "It's here. It knows we're watching." The cameras captured a faint, elongated shadow moving across the hallway. Unlike previous nights, it didn't vanish completely. It paused, almost calculating. The trap is set. Lila had created a simple but clever trap, reflective surfaces angled to catch shadows, mirrors positioned to bounce light into vents, talc powder to track movement, and audio emitters playing white noise to confuse spatial awareness. Daniel whispered, "If it enters, we'll know exactly how it moves." For the first time, we'll see it clearly. The night watcher had never been directly observed in this way. The shadow approaches. From the monitors, Daniel saw it, the featureless figure gliding down the hall, distorted and inhuman. It didn't rush. It floated, studying. Its head tilted, as if observing the patterns Lila had set. Then the vent in 5E shook. Slightly at first, then more violently. Lila whispered, "It's testing me. Testing us." Daniel noted the talc powder moving in unnatural patterns, swirls, distortions, circular scratches, indicating it was climbing walls, stretching, and probing the environment. The first engagement. Lila activated the first defensive measure, mirrors angled to direct strong light into the vent. The night watcher reacted violently. The shadows on the monitors twisted, pulling away from the light. Distortions spread across every feed simultaneously. For the first time, Daniel saw it hesitate. It recoiled from the surfaces, almost like an animal reacting to fire. The psychological battle. Lila spoke to the empty apartment calmly, deliberately. "I see you. I know what you are. You won't take anyone else without a fight." The shadow moved closer, observing. It tilted its head. A whisper echoed through the hallway monitors. "You notice. You defy." Daniel whispered to Cole. "It's aware of the trap. It's analyzing everything." Cole shuddered. "And it's still coming." The shadow's reaction. The night watcher tested the mirrored defenses, probing each vent, manipulating the shadows. It appeared on the ceiling, then the walls, stretching impossibly. Its distorted form nearly filled the monitors, yet every time it approached a reflective surface, it recoiled slightly, hesitant. Daniel realized something monumental. This was the first time the night watcher had been challenged and paused. The evidence collection. Lila moved methodically. Every time the night watcher retreated from a light beam or reflective angle, she recorded it. Every shadow distortion was logged. Daniel observed in awe. They were not just defending, they were studying it. For the first time, the hunters were learning as much as the hunted. The night watcher, intelligent and patient, wasn't defeated, but its first hesitation gave them hope. The unexpected twist. Around midnight, Daniel noticed something odd. On one monitor, a shadow moved where there shouldn't be any vent or hallway. "Cole, do you see this?" Cole leaned in. "That's impossible. That area doesn't exist on the building plans." Daniel's stomach dropped. "It's creating spaces. Extending the building, bending reality. It's manipulating perception." Lila, calm but focused, said, "It can't bend the rules if we define the space. Mirrors, sensors, everything counts. We make it visible." The night watcher retreats. After nearly an hour, the shadow slowly withdrew, moving back into the upper vents. Its presence lingered, distorted shadows stretching across the apartment long after it disappeared. Daniel exhaled. "It's retreating, for now." Lila smiled faintly. "It learned something tonight. And so did we." The first victory. While the night watcher was still alive, still adapting, tonight marked a milestone. It had hesitated. For the first time, Daniel and Lila had turned the apartment into more than a trap. They had made it a defensive battlefield. Cole whispered, "You think it'll come back stronger?" Daniel nodded grimly. "Yes, but now we know it can be challenged. And that's the first step toward surviving it." The ending hook. As dawn broke over the building, the hallway cameras captured one last fleeting distortion. A featureless head peeking around a corner, tilting slowly, watching, and then it vanished. Daniel stared at the monitors, heart racing. He understood. This fight wasn't over. But for the first time, they weren't powerless. The night watcher had met its first opposition, and it didn't forget. After the first successful confrontation in apartment 5E, Daniel Reyes and Lila Moreno felt a fragile sense of hope. They had forced the night watcher to hesitate for the first time. But hope in the building above Maggie's bakery was dangerous. The night watcher was patient, and patient predators rarely forgave. The next target, apartment 7G, a corner unit, belonged to Ethan Cole, a university student who worked nights and often came home late. Unlike previous tenants, Ethan had installed basic cameras and a smart lock system for personal security. Daniel had warned him bluntly, "You need to expect the impossible. Don't trust what you see, or what you think you hear." Ethan had nodded nervously, but Daniel saw determination in his eyes. Like Lila, he was curious, almost daring the entity to strike. Surveillance setup. From their vantage point across the street, Daniel and Lila monitored Ethan's apartment. Lila had expanded her system. Cameras positioned to cover the entire hallway outside 7G. Sound emitters creating controlled white noise. Motion sensors along the stairwell. Temporary lights positioned to illuminate corners without revealing themselves. It's a bait-and-study setup, Daniel said. We'll see it in real time, and we'll know how it moves. Cole leaned forward. Or we'll see another tenant vanish. First signs. At 11:17 p.m., the hallway lights flickered. A shadow flickered across the monitors, elongated, inhuman, and silent. Daniel whispered, "It's aware of the surveillance." Lila nodded. "And it's choosing its approach carefully. Watch the vents." The shadow hovered near the top corner of the hallway camera. Unlike before, it didn't enter Ethan's apartment immediately. The psychological pressure. Inside 7G, Ethan sat at his desk, trying to study but clearly tense. The shadows outside shifted unnaturally in his peripheral vision. "Just focus, it's not real," he muttered, but the sweat on his brow betrayed his fear. The night watcher was testing him, probing his reactions from multiple angles. Its whispers echoed faintly in the vents. "You see us. You feel us. You cannot hide." Daniel watched on the monitors. It's experimenting on him, seeing how he responds to fear. The first movement. At 11:43 p.m., the shadow extended along the hallway floor, stretching impossibly toward Ethan's door. Motion sensors triggered, but instead of responding, the figure recoiled slightly, as if aware it had been detected. Lila whispered, "It's learning from our traps too. Every sensor, every light, it remembers." Daniel muttered, "It's almost cautious." The vanishing. At 11:49 p.m., Ethan's door slid open just slightly, though he hadn't moved. The shadow moved faster than human perception could track, and in an instant, the apartment was empty. The monitors showed nothing. No movement. No doors opened fully. No windows broken. Daniel's stomach twisted. "It's gone. Just like the others." Lila's voice was tight. "But notice this." On the floor, the talc powder had swirled in a complex spiral. Unlike previous disappearances, this spiral seemed deliberate, almost like a signature left by the night watcher. A clue in the dust. Daniel leaned closer. "It's leaving messages. Or codes. Every disappearance has a pattern." Cole shivered. "Or it's mocking us." Lila studied the pattern carefully, tracing the lines with her finger. "No. It's showing us how it moves. If we understand these spirals, we can anticipate it." Daniel realized she was right. For the first time, the night watcher's movements weren't completely random. There was logic to its approach. The observation. Daniel reviewed every previous disappearance in the building. Margot Green, vent scratches, shadows, whispers. Janet Moore, vent distortions, metallic smell, shadow elongations. Rachel Kim, disappearing into ceiling vents, spiral patterns in dust. Martin Caldwell, sudden vanishing, no trace, new distortions. Ethan Cole, deliberate spiral, lingering distortions on the floor. Daniel whispered to Lila, "It's evolving with every victim. Each disappearance teaches it something new." Lila nodded grimly. "And each one leaves us clues we didn't have before." The first sign of resistance. Unlike previous tenants, Ethan had left a small note on his desk. "If I disappear, the patterns I leave will help someone survive." Daniel realized the night watcher underestimated humans who thought strategically. Each victim had a choice, passive fear or calculated defiance. The aftermath. As dawn approached, Daniel and Lila reviewed the footage. The night watcher had entered and exited silently. Its distortions left patterns in dust and shadows. It had adapted, but it had also revealed a weakness. Its movements could be tracked and anticipated. Daniel said quietly, "This is our first real advantage. We can study these spirals and distortions. We can fight back intelligently." Cole shivered. "Or we'll just make it smarter." Daniel didn't answer. He knew the risk, but he also knew survival depended on understanding the predator, not just fleeing from it. The ending hook. As Daniel and Lila left their observation post, the monitors flickered one last time. A shadow formed across the top floor windows, featureless, tall, observing. Then a whisper, faint but clear. You cannot hide forever. Daniel felt a cold dread settle in his chest. The night watcher was aware. It had learned. And its next move would be deadly and personal. The building above Maggie's bakery had grown quiet, deceptively so. Detective Daniel Reyes parked across the street with Lila Moreno, staring up at apartment 5E. For the last several nights, the night watcher had escalated, testing, probing, taking victims. Tonight, Daniel knew it would strike directly. This wasn't about observation anymore. It was about confrontation. The plan. Lila had spent hours preparing 5E. Every vent, every corner, every shadow had been accounted for. Mirrors to manipulate light and shadow. Motion sensors to track even the faintest movements. Chalk and talc outlining every doorway and vent. Small cameras streaming directly to Daniel's laptop in the car. Sound emitters producing irregular white noise to confuse the entity. This is it, Lila said, tightening her gloves. We either end this, or we become part of its collection. Daniel nodded. We've studied it for long enough. Tonight, we force it to reveal itself fully and survive. Cole, monitoring from a nearby alley, shivered. I don't like this. It's not human. It doesn't follow rules. Daniel said nothing. He already knew. The arrival. At precisely 11:13 p.m., a shadow stretched along the hallway outside 5E. Unlike previous nights, it moved deliberately, testing. Its presence distorted the monitors. The walls bent slightly, shadows stretched impossibly. Lila whispered, "It's here." And it's cautious. For the first time, it's hesitant. Daniel adjusted the monitors. It recognizes the defenses. It knows we're ready, but it still wants in. The night watcher paused at the top corner of the hallway camera feed. Its head tilted, a featureless silhouette scanning, calculating. The first engagement. Lila activated the first measure, mirrors angled to reflect intense light into the vent. The night watcher recoiled. Shadows twisted violently, stretching across walls and ceiling. A whisper echoed, metallic and distorted. You defy. For the first time, Daniel saw something in human hesitation, not just a pause, but confusion. The entity wasn't just stalking, it was reacting to a new variable, an organized human defense. Lila moved deliberately, tapping a metal rod against the floor near the vent, marking a path of resistance. I see you. You won't control this building anymore. The shadow retreated briefly into the vent, but it did not vanish. It hovered, twisting, observing every movement. The battle of shadows. For over 30 minutes, the night watcher tested every trap, mirrors, motion sensors, sound emitters. Each reaction was recorded meticulously by Lila. Every distortion, every whisper, every flicker of light was logged. Daniel realized, for the first time, the night watcher had met its match. It had adapted to humans, yes, but these humans were thinking strategically, anticipating patterns, and forcing it to reveal its movement logic. The entity lashed out. Shadows erupted across the room, forming jagged shapes along the walls and ceiling. The talc spiraled violently across the floor, and the monitors flashed with distortions. Lila stayed calm. Record everything. Follow the patterns. We'll survive this. The clues in the distortions. Daniel noticed something significant. The shadows weren't random. They followed a repeatable pattern when confronted by light and reflective surfaces. The night watcher had learned, yes, but it had also left clues in its movements, almost like a code. This is it, Daniel whispered. We can anticipate it now. We can predict its moves. Cole, tense in the alley, muttered, or it's luring us into a trap we don't understand yet. Daniel shook his head. No, we've studied too much to be blind now. We know enough to fight back. The confrontation escalates. At 12:02 a.m., the night watcher surged into the room. The shadows coalesced, forming a tall, twisting figure that loomed over the monitors. It wasn't human. Its body bent and stretched, walls rippling where it touched. Lila stepped forward, rod in hand, mirrors angled, lights shining directly into the vent. I'm not afraid of you, she said calmly. The shadow recoiled, twisting violently. Whispers filled the monitors, distorted and metallic. You will not. Daniel realized it was frustrated. It had not encountered a human who actively controlled the space and forced it into exposure. The strategic advantage. Lila moved deliberately, activating all senses. The mirrors reflected light across the room, confusing shadows, bouncing distortions back into vents. Motion sensors triggered every move, sending data to Daniel in real time. The night watcher shrieked, or something like it, a high, metallic sound that resonated through the building. Daniel whispered, "It's adapting, but it's exposed. Every time it moves, we track it." The revelation. As the entity shrieked and recoiled, Lila noticed the core of its form, a dense shadow mass clustered near the upper vent. It pulsed with every attempt to enter the apartment fully. It's feeding off fear, Daniel realized. The less afraid we are, the weaker it becomes. Lila smiled faintly. Then we don't fear it. We control the room, we control its feed. The night watcher hesitated, retreating slightly into the vent, twisting unnaturally. Its whispers grew distorted. "You see me now." The final push. Daniel instructed Lila, "Activate all lights. Flood the room. Force it into the vent corner." Mirrors reflected light into every angle. White noise emitted from strategically placed speakers. Motion sensors tracked every distortion. The night watcher surged once more, attempting to break free. But the combination of light, sound, and human strategy forced it back. For the first time, Daniel saw a shadowed figure trapped, not fully, but constrained by human ingenuity. The aftermath. At 1:18 a.m., the shadows recoiled entirely into the vent system. The monitors flickered. The building was eerily silent. Daniel and Lila exhaled, exhausted but alive. The night watcher hadn't disappeared, it had retreated. But for the first time, it had been contained, challenged, and visibly disturbed by human strategy. Cole muttered, "It won't forget this night." Daniel nodded. "No, but neither will we. We've learned its limits, and now we can fight back intelligently." The final hook. As dawn broke over the building, a faint shadow stretched across the ceiling of 5E. But unlike before, it paused at the edges of the mirrors, hesitating. Lila whispered, "It's watching, learning, but tonight, it couldn't take anyone." Daniel realized, the night watcher might be patient, it might adapt, but tonight, human ingenuity and courage had held. And for the first time, the building felt like theirs, not just a hunting ground. The fight was not over, but for now, they had won. Willow Creek was a quiet town nestled in the hills, the kind of place where neighbors borrowed sugar, dogs barked at mailmen, and everyone knew everyone else's business. That illusion of safety shattered one summer morning when 15-year-old Emma Lane didn't return from her morning run along the creek trail. Detective Harold Jensen, recently transferred from the city, was called in. Willow Creek had never seen a disappearance like this. Emma was careful, a straight-A student, known for her punctuality and routine. She didn't vanish, someone took her. The first clues. The trail along Willow Creek was familiar to locals, lined with overgrown trees and hidden alcoves. Emma's sneakers were found near a bend in the creek, soaked and abandoned. No sign of struggle. No witness reports. Jensen examined the area meticulously. Broken branches hinted at hurried movement. Tiny scuffs in the muddy bank suggested someone had dragged or carried something, possibly someone. "This wasn't random," he muttered. "She knew this trail. Whoever did this planned it." The witness, a jogger, passing hours later, reported seeing a dark figure near the bridge over the creek. The description was vague, a man in his 40s, tall, wearing a cap, but it was enough for Jensen to start a perimeter search. The locals were panicked. "Willow Creek has always been safe," they cried. But Jensen knew safety was often just a story people tell themselves. A pattern emerges. By the next morning, another teenager vanished from the edge of town, this one seen last near an abandoned warehouse. Detective Jensen began to connect the dots. Both disappeared along isolated paths near wooded areas, each without signs of struggle or witness confrontation. It was methodical, precise, predatory. The first suspect. Jensen interviewed locals and quickly identified Martin Cray, a reclusive handyman who had lived on the outskirts of town for decades. Known for his odd hours and strange behavior, he had no alibi for the second disappearance. Cray's house was cluttered with tools and locks, but nothing directly linked to the disappearances. Yet Jensen couldn't ignore the pattern: isolated paths, remote homes, and a familiarity with hidden spaces. The town's fear. Willow Creek began to feel like a trap. Parents kept children indoors. Windows were locked, doors bolted. Every rustle in the trees became a threat. Jensen walked the creek at dawn, recalling the first footprints he found. The predator was clever, leaving almost no evidence. But Jensen had learned one thing in his career: predators always repeat some part of their pattern. The hook. That evening, Jensen received a call from the local high school. A note had been found in Emma's locker. "Stop looking for me, or you'll be next." The message was chilling, written in childish handwriting, but with an adult's precision. Whoever was behind the disappearances wanted the town terrified and watching. Jensen knew it was no longer a search for missing teens. It was a race against someone who wanted control. The predator of Willow Creek wasn't just hiding, it was playing a game. And the first move had been made. Detective Harold Jensen had barely begun piecing together the events of Emma Lane's disappearance when another shock hit Willow Creek. By midweek, the town's panic escalated. 2 sets of parents had vanished without a trace. Not in the same pattern as the teenagers. This was different, deliberate, and deeply unsettling. Jensen knew the predator had evolved. Whoever, or whatever, was taking people wasn't just targeting teens. It was sending a message to the entire town. The first family. The Harrisons lived in a neat, 2-story house on Elm Street. Neighbors had seen the parents, Mark and Diane Harrison, leave for work that morning, but when children returned home from school, the house was empty. Lights were on, doors locked, cars in the driveway. And yet, no sign of struggle, no signs of forced entry. Their children, left behind, were found asleep in their bedrooms, unharmed physically but traumatized. Jensen examined the house carefully. Dust on the windowsills was undisturbed. There were no footprints in the yard, except faint scuffs near the back porch, suggesting someone had passed lightly, almost gliding. "Whoever did this knows exactly how to avoid leaving traces," Jensen said grimly. The second family. 2 nights later, the Johnsons disappeared. Their house was near Willow Creek itself, in a more isolated area. Jensen noted a chilling similarity. The families lived at opposite ends of the town but had a similar layout: isolated backyards, easy access to wooded areas. The Johnsons' children were at a sleepover. They returned to an empty house. Windows and doors intact. Lights left on. Again, nothing stolen, nothing broken. Jensen's gut told him this was not random. This was carefully orchestrated. The pattern emerges. Jensen began plotting the disappearances on a map. Teens vanished along trails and isolated paths. Parents vanished from homes close to wooded areas, early in the day or evening, when minimal witnesses were around. No one had ever seen the perpetrator. No physical evidence remained. "This isn't just a predator," Jensen muttered to Officer Clara Nguyen, his partner. "It's a tactician. Every move has a purpose." Clara frowned. "Purpose? What could the purpose be?" "Fear," Jensen replied. "Control. It wants the town panicked before it escalates further." The psychological tactics. By this point, Willow Creek had transformed. Parents kept children indoors. Businesses shuttered early. Windows were barricaded at night. The predator didn't just strike, it manipulated the town's behavior. Jensen began interviewing neighbors. He noticed subtle changes. People avoided eye contact. Footsteps on the streets were slower, cautious. Conversations ended abruptly whenever someone mentioned the disappearances. The predator's reach wasn't physical alone, it had invaded minds. A clue in silence. At the Harrison house, Jensen discovered something peculiar: a voicemail on the home phone from Diane Harrison, left just hours before her disappearance. Her tone was odd, almost robotic. "Harold, if you're listening, stay away. Please, don't follow." Jensen replayed the message multiple times. There was no background noise, no interruption. Yet something about the voice wasn't natural, slightly distorted, almost like it had been forced through some filter. "It's communicating, through the victims." Clara whispered. Jensen nodded. "Or it's testing us, teaching us, warning us. Either way, it's intentional." The town reacts. News of the parents' disappearances spread like wildfire. Willow Creek citizens stopped sleeping well. Groups of neighbors patrolled streets at night. Some families left town entirely. Jensen knew, however, that moving the town wouldn't stop the predator. It had already marked Willow Creek as its hunting ground. A local shopkeeper confided, "It's like the town itself is under its control. We can't even think straight." Jensen agreed silently. Fear was now the predator's weapon. Theories began to form. In the police station, Jensen and Clara pawed over the timeline of disappearances. Teens, isolated trails, early morning or late afternoon, minimal witnesses. Parents, isolated homes, different times of day, sometimes mid-morning. They noted one chilling pattern. Every disappearance occurred when the town's attention was scattered, when no single person could track multiple events at once. "It's watching us, studying us," Jensen said. "And now it's experimenting on families as a whole. It's escalating." Clara shivered. "So what's next? The whole town?" "Possibly," Jensen said. "Or whoever it hasn't taken yet. And we need to figure out its method before more disappearances occur." A shadow of fear. That evening, Jensen walked the streets of Willow Creek alone. The town seemed quieter than ever. The leaves in the trees rustled like whispers, the streetlights flickered unnaturally, and shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. He thought of the parents, alone in the predator's grasp. He thought of the teenagers, abducted from trails and fields. He thought of the voicemails, the warnings, the silent messages. This isn't random. This is methodical. This is deliberate. And it won't stop until it's finished. Jensen knew one thing. To save Willow Creek, he had to understand the predator's mind. And that meant watching, waiting, and learning, before the next family vanished into silence. Detective Harold Jensen had followed every lead Willow Creek could provide, abandoned trails, eyewitness accounts, and the faint traces left by the predator in the Harrison and Johnson disappearances. Each clue was frustratingly minimal, yet one pattern began to emerge. A recurring location, a decrepit house at the edge of the woods, long abandoned yet oddly preserved. It sat on the outskirts of town, hidden by thick trees and a neglected fence. Locals avoided it, whispering legends of strange lights and unexplained noises at night. To Jensen, it was the first solid lead that connected the disappearances. The approach. Jensen parked his unmarked vehicle near the dirt path leading to the house. Beside him, Officer Clara Nguyen scanned the tree line with a flashlight. "Feels wrong," Clara whispered. "It's supposed to," Jensen said. "This place has been waiting. Someone, or something, has used it for a long time." The air was damp and heavy, carrying a faint metallic scent. The house looked like it had been abandoned for decades, boarded windows, peeling paint, sagging roof, yet there was an eerie sense of care in some areas, as if it were still occupied. Inside the house, the front door creaked loudly as Jensen pushed it open. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by their flashlights, and the faint outline of furniture remained, a table, chairs, a fireplace blackened by soot long ago. But there were anomalies. Footprints in the dust, fresh and partially obscured. Symbols carved into the floorboards, strange geometric shapes that seemed almost ritualistic. A small pool of water in the corner, unnaturally still, reflecting the flashlight beams like a mirror. Clara shivered. "It's been waiting for someone, or something." "Or hiding something," Jensen replied. The feeling of being watched was immediate. Every creak of the floor, every rustle of leaves outside, felt amplified. The first discovery. In the back room, Jensen and Clara found evidence that chilled them both. A makeshift wall had been built along one side, concealing a smaller space. Inside, personal items from missing families, Emma Lane's bracelet, a notebook belonging to one of the Johnson children, a small toy from the Harrisons' home. Faint signs of habitation, old blankets folded neatly, faint marks in the dust indicating movement, and scraps of food untouched for days. Strange symbols etched into the walls, mirrors positioned in ways that seemed to manipulate the angles of the room. "It's a shrine of sorts," Clara said softly. "Or a containment area." Jensen nodded grimly. "Or both. Whoever's taking people is keeping them here. And it's organized." The predatory design. Jensen noticed the arrangement of the mirrors and symbols. They weren't random. They were designed to guide movement, or restrict it. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the mirrored angles. "If someone tries to enter or leave, the reflections confuse their perception. It's like a maze in here, and the predator knows every path." Clara's flashlight swept over the walls, and she paused at one mirror reflecting a distorted image of the room. "It's alive in a sense," she murmured. "The room itself is part of the Predator's design." Jensen's mind raced. Every disappearance, every message, every voicemail warning could have been preparation for this. The house wasn't just a location, it was a tool, a weapon. Signs of recent activity. Footprints led toward a basement door, partially hidden beneath a threadbare rug. The metal handle was cold, and faint scuff marks indicated someone had recently descended. "This is it," Jensen said. "This is where the families, and maybe others, are being kept." Clara looked uneasy. "Do we know what we're walking into? Could it be more than just people? Could the Predator itself?" "We'll find out," Jensen interrupted. "We go carefully, but we go now. Waiting isn't an option anymore." The descent. The basement stairs creaked under their weight. A damp, metallic smell grew stronger with each step. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the walls, reacting to their flashlights in ways that defied physics. At the bottom, they discovered a sprawling, dark space. The basement had been carved into the earth, extending far beyond the original footprint of the house. Within it, rows of small rooms, each with personal items belonging to the missing families. A faint hum, low and vibrating, resonating through the walls like a heartbeat. Shadows moving against the walls, just at the edge of perception, never fully formed, always shifting. "It's alive," Clara whispered. Jensen held his flashlight steady. "It's always been here. Watching. Waiting. Feeding." The first confrontation. A sudden movement caught Jensen's eye, a tall, distorted shadow emerging from the far end of the basement. Its form was inhuman, stretching unnaturally, featureless but with intent. The Predator had revealed itself. It didn't speak, yet a whisper filled the basement. "You shouldn't have come." Jensen and Clara froze, but their training took over. Jensen instructed Clara to activate a portable spotlight, flooding the creature with light. Mirrors placed strategically reflected the beams, confusing the shadows. The Predator recoiled, writhing in distorted agony. The personal items of the missing seemed to shimmer, almost vibrating with energy, as if reacting to its presence. A dangerous realization. Jensen understood immediately. The Predator wasn't just a person. It was something else, something that could manipulate perception, alter shadows, and instill fear as a weapon. "It's feeding on fear," Jensen said. "The more terrified people are, the stronger it becomes." Clara shook her head. "Then we have to stay calm, somehow." Jensen's eyes scanned the maze of basement corridors. He knew the next move had to be decisive. The Predator couldn't be allowed to escape. Too many lives hung in the balance. "We found its lair," Jensen said. "Now we end this. Or we join the missing." The hook. From the shadows, a whisper echoed across the basement. "You found me. But you cannot take them back." Jensen's heart pounded. Somewhere in the twisting corridors were the missing families, and perhaps other victims yet unseen. The Predator knew they were there, and it was ready to defend its labyrinth. The confrontation was inevitable, and in the darkness of the basement at the edge of Willow Creek, Detective Jensen understood that the Predator's true nature, and the terrifying purpose of the house, was only just beginning to be revealed. Detective Harold Jensen and Officer Clara Nguyen lingered in the darkened basement at the edge of Willow Creek, their flashlights cutting through the shadows like knives. The air was thick with the metallic scent of damp earth and rusted metal. Every step they took echoed ominously, as if the house itself were whispering secrets. After discovering the hidden rooms filled with personal items from the missing families, Jensen realized that the basement wasn't just a storage space. It was a message board, a twisted diary of the Predator's mind. And tonight, they were going to decode it. The carvings. The walls were lined with etchings, symbols carved deep into the plaster. At first glance, they seemed random, spirals, jagged lines, strange glyphs, and repeating patterns that made no immediate sense. Clara traced one symbol with her finger. These aren't just decorations, they're intentional. Each one corresponds to something. Jensen studied them closely, comparing the carvings to the layout of the basement. A horrifying realization struck him. The symbols matched the rooms, the positioning of the mirrors, and even the locations where the missing had been found or taken. "It's mapping its victims," Jensen said. Every room, every disappearance, it's all recorded here. Clara shivered. And the patterns, they almost look like instructions. Like it's leaving a manual for someone else. The whispering. As they advanced deeper, faint whispers filled the air, not in a language they recognized, but unmistakably intentional. The sounds seemed to echo from the walls themselves. Jensen's voice was low. It's communicating, or trying to communicate. Maybe to its victims, maybe to us. Clara strained to listen. Amid the unintelligible sounds, she caught fragments. Obey, follow, fear. The whispering was almost hypnotic, compelling yet horrifying. The predator's influence extended beyond physical space. It had a psychological reach, bending fear into a weapon. It feeds on our terror, Jensen said. The more afraid we are, the stronger it becomes. We have to stay focused. A disturbing discovery. In a small side room, Jensen noticed a faint outline on the floor, a complex spiral etched into the concrete. It resembled the carvings on the walls but was far more intricate. At its center lay objects from multiple victims, a bracelet, a notebook, a watch. Clara leaned over it. It's like a diary, or a shrine. But also a trap. Jensen nodded grimly. This pattern isn't random. It could be guiding movement, controlling how someone enters or leaves the room. Step wrong, and you could trigger something. They realized that the predator had designed the basement not just to contain, but to manipulate anyone who entered, guiding them psychologically and physically, ensuring terror at every step. The first message. Jensen noticed that some carvings were more recent, scratched in a darker layer of plaster. Among them, words could be made out if viewed closely. You see, but you do not understand. You hear, but you do not obey. Clara's voice was barely a whisper. It's taunting us, daring us to solve the puzzle. And it's recording our progress, Jensen said. Every fear, every hesitation, it watches, and it learns. He realized the predator wasn't merely taking victims, it was studying human behavior, anticipating reactions, and adapting its methods. The hidden rooms. Following the carvings, Jensen and Clara discovered another concealed doorway behind a mirrored panel. The space beyond was narrow and pitch black, and faint movement suggested recent activity. More victims. Clara asked, fear in her voice. Jensen hesitated. Possibly. Or it could be something else. They advanced cautiously. The walls were lined with mirrors, reflecting their flashlight beams in multiple directions. The shadows danced unnaturally, creating the illusion of movement where none existed. At the far end, they found the remnants of a family, signs of life recently abandoned. A small plate with food, a blanket carefully folded, and toys neatly stacked. The predator had been meticulous, almost ritualistic. The spiral of terror. Jensen traced the symbols and spirals back to their origin, a central chamber in the basement. It was larger than the others, almost cathedral-like, with symbols covering every surface. This is its core, Jensen said. Every disappearance, every victim, it centers here. It's the nucleus of the predator's design. Clara shivered. It's alive. Not in the normal sense, but it reacts. It changes based on who enters, who sees it. Jensen realized that this chamber was a focal point for the predator's manipulation. Mirrors and symbols weren't just decoration. They were instruments of fear, amplifying the terror of anyone who entered. A warning in the carvings. Among the symbols, Jensen discovered something chilling, a depiction of two human figures, one larger and one smaller, surrounded by jagged lines. Beneath it, words had been etched. Those who witness may survive, but only if they understand. Jensen's stomach tightened. The predator was testing them, leaving hints but ensuring that only those perceptive enough could navigate its lair and survive. It's a test, Clara said quietly. And it's escalating. Whoever survives will be changed. Jensen nodded. We need to understand the messages, the patterns, the spirals. Only then can we anticipate its next move, and possibly rescue the missing. The hook. As they prepared to leave the basement for the night, a sudden sound froze them both, a whisper from the far corner, distinct and clear. You are closer than you know, but the next step is yours alone. The message hung in the air like a challenge. Jensen realized that the predator wasn't done with Willow Creek. Not by a long shot. And now, its communications were no longer subtle, they were personal. The house at the edge of the woods wasn't just a lair. It was a living puzzle, and the next move would decide who survived, and who vanished into silence forever. Detective Harold Jensen had thought that discovering the house at the edge of the woods and decoding its carvings would give Willow Creek a fighting chance. He was wrong. The predator wasn't confined to the basement. It wasn't just a hunter of the isolated. It had begun moving through the town itself, exploiting fear as both weapon and shield. By Monday morning, the quiet streets of Willow Creek had transformed into a tense battlefield. Streetlights flickered, windows were shuttered, and a faint, almost imperceptible hum seemed to follow Jensen wherever he went. The first signs. The morning began with a missing teenager, Lucas Avery, a 13-year-old boy, vanished from his backyard while his mother was inside making breakfast. There were no footprints, no broken fences, no signs of struggle. The gate was closed, the door locked. It was as if Lucas had simply ceased to exist. Neighbors whispered about shadows in the yard the previous night, dark shapes that moved unnaturally along fences and trees. Some swore they saw figures at their windows, just outside the reach of streetlights. Jensen examined the scene. The predator wasn't just hunting, it was expanding its territory. It's learning, Jensen said grimly. Each disappearance, each panic-stricken witness, it uses that fear to gain strength and control. Clara Nguyen, his partner, noted the pattern. The first victims were isolated, then the parents. Now the predators stepping into populated areas. It's bold or desperate. Panic in the streets. By mid-morning, calls flooded the Willow Creek police station. A delivery man reported seeing a dark figure dart across the main street, vanishing into alleys. A shopkeeper found a note slipped under the door. Watch your children. Watch your homes. You are next. A jogger reported seeing shadows flicker along the edges of the creek, moving with impossible speed. The town had begun to fracture. Parents kept children inside, and even adults hesitated to step outside. Grocery stores had empty shelves. Streets that had once been filled with morning traffic were deserted. This isn't random terror, Jensen said. It's psychological warfare. It wants the town in chaos before it strikes again. The predator's tactics. Jensen and Clara began to notice an unnerving feature. The predator seemed to manipulate not just shadows, but perception itself. Witnesses described hallways appearing longer than they were. Doors and windows subtly shifting positions when no one was looking. Reflections in mirrors or glass showing figures that weren't there. Jensen theorized that the predator could bend reality, or at least create the illusion of bending reality, to disorient its victims. It's not just hunting people, Jensen said. It's hunting certainty. It wants everyone to question what they see, and when they do, it becomes stronger. The first encounter in town. At dusk, Jensen received a call. A figure had been spotted near the old mill, on the northern edge of Willow Creek. Jensen and Clara arrived to find Lucas Avery's backpack abandoned on the sidewalk, straps tangled in the weeds. A shadow moved along the alley, elongated and twisting unnaturally. Jensen drew his flashlight. "Stop!" he shouted. The shadow paused, but did not flee. A whisper filled the alley, metallic and distorted. "You follow too closely. You do not understand." Clara steadied her flashlight, sweeping the figure. The predator's form shifted with each angle, partially invisible, partially grotesque. It was not human. Its limbs elongated and twisted, moving like liquid shadow, reacting instantly to light and sound. "It's testing us again," Jensen muttered. "We need to track its movement without letting it anticipate ours." The spread of fear. As night fell, Willow Creek descended further into panic. Families barricaded themselves in homes. Neighborhoods organized watches, using flashlights and cell phones to scan the streets. Every shadow became a threat. Jensen noted a chilling pattern. Wherever the predator moved, the residents' fear intensified. Windows rattled as if something unseen passed by. Dogs barked frantically, and electronic devices malfunctioned sporadically, lights flickering or radios emitting static. It was no longer just hunting people. It was weaponizing the town's own fear against itself. A grim realization. By midnight, Jensen and Clara regrouped at the station. Reports from officers patrolling the town painted a terrifying picture. Shadows darted across rooftops, too fast to follow. Doors opened and closed on their own. Some residents claimed they saw figures standing silently in their homes, vanishing when approached. It's not just a predator, Clara said, exhausted. It's everywhere, and it's invisible until it wants to be seen. Jensen's mind raced. The basement at the edge of the woods had been a stronghold, but now the predator had left that lair and infiltrated the town itself. It's evolving, he said grimly. And if it can move through the town like this, there's no telling how many more will vanish tonight. The town strikes back. Despite the fear, Willow Creek's citizens refused to sit idle. Patrols intensified, neighbors called in sightings, and some families attempted to lure the predator into traps with motion sensors and lights, similar to those used in the basement. But the predator was smarter. Every trap failed, every signal of movement vanished without evidence. It didn't merely avoid capture. It toyed with the town, creating illusions and sending subtle threats to manipulate human behavior further. A message left behind. As Jensen returned to the police station, he discovered a note slipped under the front door. Unlike previous messages, this one was personal. You are learning, but you will never save them all. The handwriting was almost familiar, childlike in some places, adult in others. But the implication was clear. The predator knew they were tracking it. It was watching, calculating, and manipulating at a level beyond normal human comprehension. It's aware of us now, Jensen said. Every step we take, it's already thinking 3 steps ahead. And that is terrifying. The hook. By the end of the night, Jensen realized that the predator's influence had become inescapable. Shadows stretched unnaturally across empty streets, whispers filled the town, and homes felt like cages. He understood one terrible truth. The predator wasn't just confined to the house at the edge of the woods. It had become a force in Willow Creek itself, moving unseen, hunting fear, and preparing for its next strike. Tonight, the town would see the predator in full force. And not everyone would survive. Detective Harold Jensen and Officer Clara Nguyen knew Willow Creek had entered its darkest chapter. The predator that had begun in isolation at the edge of the woods was now operating freely throughout the town, using fear itself as both weapon and bait. Every disappearance, every shadow, every whispered threat was a carefully laid trap, and tonight, the predator was ready to escalate. The first trap. It began with an anonymous tip to the police station. A child had been spotted near the old water treatment facility, on the outskirts of town. The caller claimed they were following the child but suddenly lost sight of them. Jensen and Clara drove immediately, lights cutting through the dense fog that had settled over Willow Creek. The water facility loomed like a decayed cathedral, rusting pipes and moss-covered walls casting long, sinister shadows. Jensen's instincts screamed that this wasn't a random disappearance. It was a lure. It's using the child as bait, Clara said grimly. We walk in, it could spring its trap. Jensen nodded, flashlight and service pistol ready. We need to stay calm. That's the only advantage we have. The hallways of fear. Inside the facility, the walls seemed to stretch unnaturally. Corridors bent at impossible angles, and shadows twisted as if they had a life of their own. The predator had transformed the space into a labyrinth, echoing the designs in its basement at the edge of the woods. Footsteps echoed around them, but no one could be seen. The faint sound of breathing and whispering made every step heavier. It's testing us again, Jensen said. It wants to see if we panic. Suddenly, the sound of running footsteps echoed down the hall. They moved cautiously, following the noises, until they reached an open doorway. There, the predator had set a trap, a circle of broken mirrors reflecting the flashlight beams in a dizzying array of angles. Step inside, and it can disorient you completely, Clara said. It's like a psychological minefield. Decoding the lure. Jensen examined the mirrors, noting subtle scratches along the floor, an instruction, a path that could safely guide someone through the maze without triggering the predator's manipulations. It's leaving breadcrumbs, Jensen muttered. If we follow the pattern, we might avoid the worst of its influence. Clara took a deep breath and led the way, stepping lightly through the circle. Jensen followed, flashlight and weapon at the ready. The shadows seemed to twist around them, but by following the subtle markers, they reached the center safely. There, they discovered the child, the one mentioned in the tip, huddled and crying, untouched physically but terrified. It's feeding on fear, not the body, Jensen said softly. The more terror it induces, the stronger it becomes. The predator observes. The whispers were louder here, almost intelligible. You are learning. You are careful, but the others will not survive. It wasn't a voice in the room. It wasn't outside. It seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, from the very air. The predator was aware of them, tracking every movement, guiding every reaction. Jensen realized that each trap was a communication, a message, a test, and a warning all at once. The predator wasn't just killing, it was teaching the town, shaping their fear, and refining its methods. The second lure. As they escorted the child back toward safety, another report came in. A neighbor had disappeared near the edge of Willow Creek's Central Park. Jensen and Clara returned immediately, finding a scenario eerily similar to the water facility. Shadows moving impossibly, whispers echoing through empty streets, and signs of deliberate manipulation. Footprints that led nowhere, objects shifted slightly to confuse perception. "It's becoming bolder," Clara said. "It's stepping into the town's core, not just isolated areas." Jensen studied the scene, noting the strategic placement of objects and the subtle guidance of shadows. "It's using the environment to manipulate us, to force mistakes. This isn't random, it's systematic." A town on edge. By the next morning, Willow Creek was a ghost town. Shops remained shuttered, streets deserted, and every resident kept children indoors. The predator's influence had extended beyond its physical presence. It had invaded the collective consciousness of the town. Local families shared reports of shadows flitting just out of sight along fences and rooftops, whispering voices warning them not to leave home, doors mysteriously opening at night, then closing silently. Jensen realized the predator's reach was no longer limited to direct contact. Fear itself was the weapon, and the town's reactions amplified its power. "We can't fight it like a normal criminal," Jensen said. "This isn't about bullets or arrests, it's about outthinking it, predicting it, staying calm while it tries to break us." A chilling pattern. Analyzing the locations of the traps, Jensen noticed a grid forming. The predator was moving through the town in a deliberate sequence, targeting areas that would maximize fear and confusion. Schools, parks, homes near wooded areas, all points on a map forming a pattern that seemed almost ritualistic. "It's choreographing its terror," Clara said. "Each disappearance, each trap, it's part of a plan." "And the plan," Jensen said grimly, "is bigger than just taking people. It's teaching the town what fear can do. And if we don't stop it soon, it will be unstoppable." The predator strikes close. That night, Jensen returned home to find a note slipped under his door. Unlike the other messages, this one was direct. "You are close, but the next choice is yours alone." It was a challenge, a warning, and a promise all at once. The predator had now singled out its pursuers, testing their resolve and forcing them to engage on its terms. Jensen knew that the traps and lures were escalating, and the next step would demand more than caution. It would demand confrontation. The hook. The predator was no longer confined to its lair or isolated areas. It was moving openly through Willow Creek, learning, manipulating, and challenging every person in town. The lures weren't just about capturing victims. They were shaping the town, conditioning them to fear, and preparing for something far larger than anyone could yet imagine. Tonight, Willow Creek would see the predator's full cunning, and those who survived the traps would understand the stakes, but not necessarily the rules. The game had become personal, and Jensen knew that if he misstepped even once, the predator would strike, and someone, or everyone, would vanish. Detective Harold Jensen had seen fear in Willow Creek before, but nothing like this. The predator's presence was no longer limited to disappearances or traps. It was a shadow that followed, an unseen force manipulating the town's reality. Now, it was personal. A threat in the night. Jensen was reviewing maps of the latest disappearances when his phone buzzed. Clara's voice was tight with tension. "Harold, something's moving near the police station. I can't see it clearly, but it's wrong." Jensen grabbed his coat and headed out, flashlight and weapon in hand. The streets were eerily quiet, the fog thick and clinging to every lamppost. Shadows shifted unnaturally, stretching and twisting in ways that seemed impossible. When he arrived, Clara was standing near the patrol cars, her flashlight beam bouncing across a form that shouldn't exist. The predator, its shape fluid, limbs elongated and distorted, slid silently between the vehicles. "It's watching us," Clara whispered. "It knows exactly where we are." Jensen nodded. "And it wants us to know that it can be anywhere." The first direct encounter. The predator advanced slowly, but each step seemed calculated, deliberate. Its featureless form warped as it moved, defying natural light and shadow. "Step carefully," Jensen muttered. "It's testing us, gauging our reactions." They raised their flashlights, beams crisscrossing, attempting to isolate the predator. For a moment, it recoiled, revealing glimpses of the rooms in the hidden basement, as if the lair itself was projecting through it. A whisper slithered through the air. "You cannot stop what has already begun, but you may survive if you understand." Clara shivered. It's learning from us now. Every movement, every breath. The shadow expands. Reports flooded the station, lights flickering in homes, unexplained footsteps, children claiming to see figures moving silently outside windows. Jensen realized the predator had evolved. It was no longer confined to the lair or the traps. It was present everywhere, a shadow influencing perception, bending reality just enough to destabilize the town. "Fear isn't its weapon anymore," Jensen said grimly. "It's its environment. It controls perception, and we're trapped in it." Clara nodded. "It's like it's inside the town's mind as much as its streets." Tracking the predator, Jensen used maps and reports to plot a probable path. Each recent disappearance, each encounter, formed a pattern, a series of points converging near the old woods, the water facility, and the edge of town. "It's predictable," Jensen said. "Not in exact timing, but in zones. It wants us to follow, to react. And the more we react," Clara added, "the more it can manipulate the town. We need to anticipate it instead." A terrifying realization. By midnight, Jensen returned home to find a note slipped under his door. "You watch. You learn. But the shadow follows. Alone, you are nothing." It was direct now. Personal. The predator was no longer just an entity in the town. It was challenging the hunters themselves. Jensen's pulse raced. "It's targeting us now," he said. "And we can't make a mistake." The predator's shadow had extended beyond the lair, the traps, and even the town's streets. It was everywhere, watching, learning, manipulating. Jensen understood that the final confrontation would require more than courage. It would require understanding the predator's mind and predicting its moves. Willow Creek would never be the same, and those who faced the shadow would discover the true depth of its terror or vanish trying. Detective Harold Jensen and Officer Clara Nguyen had been chasing shadows for weeks, mapping disappearances, decoding carved messages, and surviving traps that preyed on fear itself. Now, the predator was no longer a hidden threat. It was personal, present in every corner of Willow Creek, moving unseen, manipulating perception, and escalating terror. Tonight, the chase would end. Preparing for the hunt, Jensen and Clara gathered at the police station in the dead of night. Maps were spread across tables, reports pinned and annotated. Every recent disappearance, every trap, every whispered threat was marked. The predator had a pattern, a rhythm, and if they could predict it, they might finally corner it. "It's going to test us harder than ever," Jensen said. "It's patient, it learns from fear, and it anticipates our moves. Tonight, we have to stay calm and think 3 steps ahead." Clara checked the portable lights, cameras, and motion sensors they had set up in key areas. "If it moves like it did before, we can predict where it'll strike next," she said. "We have a chance." "Not a guarantee," Jensen muttered. "Just a chance." The predator's lair. The trail led them back to the house at the edge of the woods, the lair where it all began. Trees clawed at the night sky, and fog hugged the ground like a living thing. The predator seemed to anticipate their arrival. Shadows shifted as they approached, and a low whispering filled the air. "You are coming, and yet, you do not understand." Jensen and Clara stepped carefully through the front door. Inside, the smell of damp earth and rusted metal was stronger, almost suffocating. The hidden rooms, the mirrors, and the carvings were all intact. The predator had been waiting. "It's baited the house for us," Jensen said. "Everything we see is part of the trap." Navigating the maze. The basement stairs groaned under their weight. Each step seemed to echo unnaturally, and the air grew colder. Shadows shifted against the walls, elongating and retreating in ways that defied reality. Clara's flashlight caught a movement, a ripple in the darkness, like liquid shadow. "It's here," she whispered. "It's been waiting." They reached the central chamber of the basement, the cathedral-like room where the predator's power concentrated. Mirrors lined every wall, reflecting and multiplying their flashlights. Symbols carved into the floors and walls created a labyrinth of psychological manipulation. "This is its core," Jensen said. "If we survive here, we survive the predator." The predator revealed. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into form. The predator, tall and featureless, limbs twisting unnaturally, body flickering like a dark flame. It didn't speak, but the whispers in the room were deafening. "You are here, and yet, you do not belong." Jensen and Clara held their ground. Each reflected beam of light distorted the predator's shape, confusing its perception, but it was relentless. It advanced, a living shadow moving faster than either human could comprehend. "Focus on the symbols," Jensen shouted. "They react to fear, but we can use them too." Clara nodded, following the carvings etched into the floor. Each step aligned with the predator's manipulations, minimizing the hallucinatory effects. The battle of perception. The confrontation wasn't physical at first, it was psychological. The predator's presence warped reality. Mirrors reflected multiple forms of itself. Whispered threats rattled nerves. Shadows extended into the corners, and the floor seemed to shift beneath their feet. Jensen kept a steady tone. "Calm. Breathe. Focus. It wants us panicked." Clara's hands trembled slightly, but she pressed forward. They advanced toward the center, where the predator's influence was strongest. "It's reacting to our fear," Clara said. "We can't let it win that battle." "Then we fight its rules," Jensen said. "We define the battlefield now." Turning the predator's power against itself. Jensen noticed a pattern in the reflections, mirrors positioned in such a way that the predator's movements were partially amplified, creating feedback in its own perception. "Clara, aim the lights at the mirrors over there," he said. "Force it to see itself." The beams bounced through the chamber, hitting multiple mirrors. The predator convulsed, its form distorting further, struggling against the maze it had built for others. The whispers turned frantic, chaotic. "No, this cannot. You are not supposed to." For the first time, Jensen realized the predator could be affected by its own designs. Its manipulation of perception was perfect, except against those who understood the rules it created. The rescue. Behind the predator, in the smaller hidden rooms, the missing families, children and adults alike, huddled, silent and terrified. The predator had been guarding them, using fear to maintain control. Jensen and Clara worked quickly, using the mirrored patterns to approach the rooms safely. One by one, they freed the trapped victims, guiding them along paths that minimized exposure to the predator's psychological influence. "Stay calm," Jensen instructed. "Do not panic. We are in control now." The victims moved silently, almost trance-like, as they followed the officers. The predator writhed in the center chamber, disoriented by the light and reflections, unable to strike. The final strike. With the families safe, Jensen faced the predator directly. He held a portable spotlight at its base, directing beams into every mirror in the room. Clara assisted, ensuring no shadow escaped unlit. The predator's form twisted violently, screaming in whispers that shredded the air, but the concentrated light and mirrored reflections began to break down its cohesion. "You cannot end me." "You underestimate human resolve," Jensen replied, pressing the light further. Finally, the shadow convulsed, shuddered, and with a deafening silence, collapsed into the floor, dissipating into nothingness. The mirrors no longer reflected multiple forms, the whispers vanished, and the oppressive fear lifted from the basement. Aftermath. By dawn, the survivors were escorted from the house. Families embraced, trembling but alive. Willow Creek had survived, but the town would bear scars, both psychological and physical, for years to come. Jensen and Clara surveyed the empty basement. The predator was gone, but its labyrinth of fear and shadows remained, a haunting reminder of the danger that had once lurked within the edge of the woods. "It's over for now," Clara said, exhausted. Jensen nodded. "We stopped it tonight, but we'll always have to be vigilant. Predators like this, they leave a mark that doesn't fade." The house at the edge of the woods was silent. No shadows moved, no whispers filled the air. But in the minds of those who had faced the predator, the memory remained vivid. The twisting corridors, the mirrored labyrinth, the chilling intelligence that had fed on fear. And somewhere, Deep in the corners of Willow Creek, the survivors understood one unshakable truth. Evil could hide anywhere, waiting. And next time, it might not leave a message. The first light of morning over Willow Creek brought a fragile sense of relief. Detective Harold Jensen and Officer Clara Nguyen stood at the edge of the woods, gazing at the house that had been the predator's lair. Its shadows no longer writhed, no whispers echoed through the trees. For the first time in weeks, the town was quiet. But peace, they both knew, was tenuous. The predator had left marks, psychological, emotional, and lingering in every corner of Willow Creek. Reclaiming the night would take more than removing a single threat. Returning to the streets. By midday, the townspeople cautiously emerged from their homes. Windows were unshuttered, doors unlocked, and the streets filled with tentative movement. Grocery stores reopened, children played under watchful eyes, and neighbors began to speak aloud again, breaking the months-long silence. Jensen walked through the main street, noting the subtle signs of fear that remained: half-closed curtains, locked doors despite the clear day, and the nervous glances of people who had learned to distrust the dark. "They've survived the predator," Clara said, "but they are still living in the fear it left behind." Jensen nodded. "The first step in reclaiming the night is reminding people that it belongs to them, not whatever that thing was." Rebuilding trust. The police organized patrols to reassure citizens. Officers checked homes, schools, and community centers. Signs were posted offering counseling services for those traumatized by weeks of terror. The town's recovery wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Families reunited, children were returned to parents, and neighborhoods held meetings to discuss safety measures. Jensen observed that even small actions, turning on lights at night, walking together, and talking about their experiences, helped diminish the residual fear. The predator thrived on isolation, Jensen explained to the town council. Together, you reclaim your power. Alone, it can manipulate. Together, it loses control. Stories of survival. Stories emerged of how families navigated the predator's traps, a mother guiding her children through mirrored hallways by focusing on the symbols she had glimpsed, a father remaining calm when shadows twisted unnaturally, and neighbors protecting one another despite the terror. "It wasn't just luck," Clara said. "It was courage, observation, and the refusal to surrender to fear." Jensen agreed. The predator may have been intelligent, but human resolve is stronger when people stand together. Facing the trauma. Despite the predator's defeat, Willow Creek bore scars. Many residents struggled with nightmares, anxiety, and lingering suspicion of shadows. Local therapists and counselors worked tirelessly, helping people confront and process the terror. Jensen himself had difficulty sleeping. Every rustle of leaves or flicker of light made him tense, a reminder of the weeks spent in the predator's labyrinth. Clara faced similar struggles, though they both knew they had saved countless lives. "Healing takes time," Jensen said, "but we've taken back the night. Slowly, people will learn that it belongs to them again." Lessons learned. The town council implemented changes to prevent future threats, improved lighting throughout neighborhoods, regular community patrols, and emergency communication systems. More importantly, Willow Creek learned to confront fear collectively, not individually. Jensen and Clara led workshops, teaching residents how to recognize psychological manipulation and traps similar to those used by the predator. Awareness became a tool, and vigilance became a shared responsibility. "We can't assume evil will never return," Jensen said, "but we can ensure it doesn't find an easy foothold." The night returns. As evening fell, the streets of Willow Creek slowly reclaimed their normalcy. Children played under the golden glow of street lights, neighbors talked on porches, and families walked together. The predator's influence had faded, replaced by community, courage, and resilience. Jensen walked the streets with Clara, observing the recovery. Every laugh, every lighted window, every shared story was a victory against the terror that had gripped the town. "The night is ours again," Clara said softly. Jensen nodded. "For now, but we remain vigilant. Fear doesn't disappear, it just waits for opportunity." The hook. Willow Creek had survived the predator's reign, but the memory remained. In every shadow, in every whisper of the wind, the residents remembered what had happened and what could happen again. The predator may be gone, but its lessons linger. Fear had been conquered, yes, but only because the town stood together. And the night, The night belonged to them once more. As darkness fell, lights glimmered in every window. Willow Creek had reclaimed its night, and for the first time in months, the town could sleep with the confidence that they had faced the unimaginable and survived. The sun rose over Willow Creek, painting the town in soft, golden light. Streets once haunted by shadows and whispers now bustled with cautious optimism. Families returned to normal routines, children played in parks, and neighbors exchanged greetings with tentative smiles. On the surface, the predator had been defeated, its lair dismantled, its traps neutralized, and its victims freed. Yet, for Detective Harold Jensen and Officer Clara Nguyen, the sense of victory was bittersweet. They had survived, the town had survived, but a shadow remained, not in form, but in memory, in fear, and in the unseen ways the predator had shaped the minds of those it hunted. The lingering fear. Even weeks after the predator's defeat, residents reported unsettling feelings. Small things triggered anxiety. Shadows that stretched just a little too far across hallways. Reflections in mirrors that seemed off by a fraction. Faint whispers carried by the wind in the dead of night. Jensen understood this all too well. The predator may be gone, he told Clara as they patrolled the quiet streets, but the fear it left is part of the town now. You can't destroy memory. You can only survive it. Clara nodded. And people will. But we need to help them understand that the shadows don't move on their own. That the whispers are echoes of what happened, not threats themselves. Returning to the house at the edge of the woods, Jensen and Clara returned to the predator's lair one last time. The house was silent. Broken furniture, scattered symbols, and mirrors remained, but the twisting shadows and hallucinatory effects were gone. The house seemed empty, but they both felt the weight of what had occurred there, a heavy presence that didn't dissipate entirely. It's a scar, Jensen said, tracing the edges of a carved symbol in the basement wall. The predator left this for the town, and it will remain here long after we're gone. Clara examined the mirrors. A warning, she said, not just to us, but to anyone who might come after. It's a reminder that evil can hide, and it waits patiently for opportunity. The community heals. In the weeks following the confrontation, Willow Creek slowly reclaimed its rhythm. Schools reopened with full attendance. Neighborhood watch programs became standard. Families bonded over shared experiences, and counselors held workshops to help residents process the psychological trauma. Jensen and Clara were at the forefront of these efforts. They spoke openly with townspeople about fear, survival, and vigilance. They emphasized that while the predator's reign was over, the lessons it left were permanent. Fear is natural, Jensen told a group at the community center. It's how you respond that matters. Together, you reclaim the night. Together, you remain safe. Residents began to trust again. Children ran through the streets without hesitation. Lights glowed from every home at night. Slowly, the town's heart, once frozen with terror, began to beat again. The predator's legacy. But even as life returned to normal, the predator's presence lingered in subtle ways. Jensen noticed it in the behavior of the townspeople. Parents double-checked locks more than necessary. Children hesitated when walking alone after dark. Residents watched shadows and movement in ways that were once instinctive but now wary. The predator had been defeated physically, but its psychological imprint endured. It had taught Willow Creek fear, and with that knowledge came a responsibility. The town could not ignore the lessons it had been forced to learn. It's not about terror anymore, Jensen said to Clara as they watched the sunset. It's about awareness. That shadow may linger, but it also teaches resilience. The final encounter with memory. One night, Jensen returned to the edge of the woods alone. The house was quiet, empty of predators or threats, but the air seemed heavier. A faint whisper drifted through the trees, just audible. You survived, this time. He shivered but did not run. He had faced the predator, outsmarted it, and saved lives. Yet he understood that some darkness never fully disappears. It remains in memory, in instinct, in the very fabric of the places it touched. It's gone, he murmured to the night. But the shadow, it always lingers. The wind rustled through the trees, as if in reply, and for the first time, Jensen felt a strange mixture of respect and caution. The predator had been cunning, relentless, and horrifying, but it had also left the town stronger, more vigilant, more connected. Willow Creek rebuilt. Months later, Willow Creek was thriving. Shops reopened, schools flourished, and festivals returned to the town square. Residents still remembered the darkness, but they refused to live under it. The predator's traps, its psychological games, and its reign of fear had forged a town capable of resilience. Jensen and Clara continued to serve as protectors, patrolling and educating, ensuring that the lessons of the predator were never forgotten. Willow Creek had reclaimed its nights, but the memory of the shadow remained a guiding force, teaching vigilance and courage in the face of unseen threats. The town survived because we faced fear together, Clara said. And even if shadows linger, Jensen replied, they no longer have the power they once did. The hook. The predator was gone, yet its presence remained, like an imprint on the air itself. Shadows in the corner of a street, whispers along the wind, moments of unease in darkened rooms, all reminders that evil does not vanish easily. It leaves marks, shaping perception, teaching caution, and lingering in memory. Willow Creek had survived the unimaginable, but every shadow, every whisper, would remind its people that vigilance is eternal, and that some darkness never truly disappears. And in that lingering shadow, the town found both fear and the courage to move forward, stronger, united, and watchful, prepared for whatever might emerge from the edges of the night.